In 1994, Sony released ESPN Sunday Night NFL, a mediocre sports game that spawned an entire series. By the late 90s, this series, now called NFL GameDay, was arguably better than EA's Madden, and for a brief period, Sony was the king of NFL video games. The NFL GameDay series would continue into the new millennium, with NFL GameDay 2001 releasing for the PlayStation 1, and for the first time, the PlayStation 2 as well. The series had a die-hard following on the older console, but had trouble selling on the PS2. By May of 2004, Sony announced that most of the 989 Sports lineup, including NFL GameDay, NCAA Game Breaker, NBA Shootout, and NCAA Final Four, were cancelled. The only surviving franchise from this era was 989's MLB series, which would eventually become MLB The Show, the franchise we still have today. While NFL GameDay was cancelled after GameDay 2004, it technically wasn't the last game in the series. Because GameDay was such a big hit on the original PlayStation, Sony gave longtime fans of the series one last swan song for the console with NFL GameDay 2005. Strangely, GameDay 2005 did not release for the PlayStation 2, despite the previous 4 titles having PS2 versions. But it makes sense, considering it was easier for them to justify one last PS1 title, as development was cheaper and sales were actually better on the older, nearly obsolete console. It was also one of the final games for the PlayStation 1, making it a fitting final exclusive. But NFL GameDay 2005 is a weird title, not necessarily because of its contents, but because of the circumstances around its release. Very little information is found online about this game, and no major publication reviewed it, at least not that I can find online. A modern-day equivalent to this would be if EA announced that the Madden series was cancelled, but then they quietly released Madden 24 for the PlayStation 4 only, and no one ever talked about it. Despite this being the last GameDay title, Sony did announce a new football game after, only without the NFL license, since shortly after GameDay 05's release, the NFL signed an exclusive rights agreement with EA Sports. This unlicensed title was called Road to Sunday, and not only was it a football game, but it was also a story-driven fighting game. While you can find screenshots and even a trailer of this game online, it never released, as Sony canceled development a few months after announcing it. Road to Sunday was supposed to be a Blitz the League type game using the gameplay engine of the PS2 NFL GameDay titles, and I wonder how it would have fared had it released. NFL GameDay 2005 remains the last Sony-developed NFL game, and the last title in the once legendary NFL GameDay series. Let's take a deeper look. Gameplay in GameDay 2005 was very similar to previous GameDay titles for the PS1. This wasn't a bad thing, as the late 90s GameDay titles were considered the best football games for the system, even better than Madden on the PlayStation 1. It's less of a simulation-style game on the old console, and more of an arcade-style game, although it was more realistic than something like NFL Blitz. You could toggle between a simulation or arcade gameplay style, but it still felt like an arcade title regardless. It was 11-on-11 football with play selection, the ability to quiet down the crowd pre-snap, and then once you snapped the ball, you would execute the play. But the gameplay action was fast and high scoring. Deep passing plays worked more often than not, and defensive backs rarely defended their zones properly, allowing big plays. However, when facing man coverage, the defense would create a lot of turnovers through the air, so regardless of which side of the ball you were on, big plays were always happening. The pass rush was also relentless, giving you a very short window to make a decision passing the ball. When throwing, passes actually had a great arc to them, allowing you to drop the ball right in the bucket. After throwing the ball, you could switch to the receiver icon and move him closer to the ball if you wanted, giving you a lot of user control. Get hit as you throw, and the ball will come out as a wobbly duck. Players would get fatigued during the game, with a fatigue meter shown under each player when you hold the left or right bumper pre-snap. Running the ball meant following your blockers and pressing the X button when you'd run into a defender. The game would automatically choose a move for you to execute, which made it easy to pick up and play for newcomers. And it's really fun, even today, to run through defenders as someone like Curtis Martin. It wouldn't always work, however, and sometimes you'd be slammed to the ground in dramatic fashion before even crossing the line of scrimmage. After making a big play, you could hit triangle to celebrate, which was a nice touch for such an old game. The result of all of this was a chaotic but really fun NFL game that anyone could enjoy. Today, these graphics look pretty rough, but back in 2004, this was actually some of the best visuals a PlayStation 1 game could have. This is the best looking game in the series for the console, and something about seeing players like Eli Manning or Phillip Rivers in a PS1 game makes me feel really old. Lots of players had signature animations, such as Peyton Manning or Curtis Martin, and tackle animations included a decent variety, such as gang tackles, dragging a defender, shoestring trip-ups, and more. There were some massive hits in the game that would make modern Madden's hitstick seem weak. For those that grew up playing those awesome late 90s game day titles, this was one last gift from Sony. More of what everyone loved, but with updated rosters, uniforms, and stadiums. The game had a season mode with a preset schedule and lineups, as well as a tournament mode for something a bit quicker. The general manager mode was actually pretty solid. When selecting a team, the game would highlight that team's star player and even give you a short history summary of the team. You jump right into a rookie draft and then sign your picks. During the season, you could actually view standing stats and even Pro Bowl voting, weekly awards, and the MVP race. You could set lineups, trade players, draft rookies, most of the basics for multiple seasons. It's not going to blow Madden 2005 on the PS2 away or NFL 2K5, but if you still mostly played games on the PS1 back then, it was all you could ask for. The play editor, a staple in these game day titles, was awesome and something I wish modern day Madden games would have. You could select any player, from the receivers to the running backs to the offensive linemen, and set up their assignment for the play. Whether the lineman should pull left or screen block or run block or pass protect. You could set the quarterback drop to any distance, or even have him roll to the left or right with different rollout lengths. Receivers could be set to run a reverse, pass block, or run any route your heart desired. And then you could test the play against any defense. It was insanely in-depth for a PS1 game. Presentation wasn't great visually, but it was great all around. Before a game or even practice, you'd hear some epic orchestra NFL music that would just get you hyped. There was a pregame coin toss, commentary was solid, and the home crowd would actually get loud and chant defense in crucial moments. After Green Bay got a pick six on me, the player actually did a Lambeau leap. If you tried quieting the crowd as the away team, they would just get louder. The chain gang would even measure close spots, with the crowd booing or cheering accordingly. When barking calls, some players such as Peyton Manning had their actual voice in the game. These details helped this PS1 game feel alive, surprisingly more so than some more modern NFL games on newer hardware. After this nice swan song for the PS1 and NFL GameDay, Sony started working on a new, unlicensed football game called Road to Sunday. It went far enough into development to get a trailer, as you can see here, but it never released. Think of it as something like Blitz the League. It was a story-driven fighting and football game. The story followed a man named Blake Dugan, someone who inherits a football team after his dad dies in an explosion in Jamaica. He eventually learns that his father was borrowing money from a Jamaican kingpin to buy the Los Angeles show, and now his father's debt is his. Dugan needed to win big with his team to have a chance at paying it back, or maybe he'd find himself also dying in an explosion. The premise is nuts, and I really wish this game released. Not only would you play the football games, but you'd also gamble between games, play in an underground fighting league, and it appeared to have RPG elements. I only heard of this game for the first time while researching for this video, so there's a good chance you've never heard of it either. But man, what an idea. After Road to Sunday was cancelled, that was it for Sony's American football games, making NFL GameDay 2005 the last NFL GameDay and the last Sony-made NFL game. Keeping in mind that this was a PlayStation 1 game that released when the PlayStation 2 was already halfway through its lifespan, this was a pretty solid game. And I've had a ton of fun playing it for this video. It's odd how no publication seemed to review this game when it released, maybe because it was incredibly similar to previous GameDay titles for the PS1, but being able to play with 2004 rosters on such an old console is really cool. While the NFL GameDay series is now a relic of sports gaming history, for a brief moment, it was on top of the world and had even beaten Madden as the top NFL game to get. You can still catch glimpses of that greatness on GameDay 2005, a hidden gem that's unfortunately long forgotten today. Give it a try if you haven't, either through a backwards compatible PS3, an actual PS1, or a PS1 emulator on your computer. I had more fun playing this game than I have had with a new football game in a good while. Thanks for watching.